हाँ जी, सत श्री अकाल जी साਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ। आई होप ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ठीक ठाक ਹੋਵੋਗੇ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਰੈਡੀ ਹਾਂ जी अपनी 15 मिनट की रीडिंग वास्ते। बुक पढ़ांगे 15 मिनट ਲਈ। सो अगर ਤੁਸੀਂ चैनल ਤੇ ਨਵੇਂ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ चैनल ਨੂੰ जरूर सब्सक्राइब करियो ਤੇ मैं अपना टाइमर लगा लवां। सो हाँ जी, टाइमर अपना स्टार्ट है तो बुक पढ़नी करते हैं स्टार्ट। This time, the now enraged lobsters come at each other viciously with their claws extended to grapple. Each tries to flip the other on its back successfully. A successfully flipped lobster will conclude that its opponent is capable of inflicting, what is inflicting, serious damage. It generally gives up and leaves, although it harbors intense resentment and gossips endlessly about the victor behind its back. If neither can overturn the other, or if one will not quit despite being flipped, the lobsters move to level 4. Doing so involves extreme risk and is not something to be engaged in without forethought. Or one or both lobsters will emerge damaged from the ensuing fray. What is fray? Perhaps fatally. The animals advance on each other with increasing speed. Their claws are open so they can grab a leg or antenna or an eye stalk or anything else exposed and vulnerable. Once a body part has been successfully grabbed, the grabber will tail flip backwards sharply with the claw clamped firmly shut and try to tear it off. Disputes that have escalated to this point typically create a clear winner and loser. The loser is unlikely to survive, particularly if he or she remains in the territory occupied by the winner, now a mortal enemy. In the aftermath of a losing battle, regardless of how aggressively a lobster has behaved, it becomes unwilling to fight further, even against another previously defeated opponent. A vanquished competitor loses confidence, sometimes for days. Sometimes the defeat can have even more severe consequences. If a dominant lobster is badly defeated, its brain basically dissolves. Then it grows a new subordinate brains. Then it grows a new subordinate brain, one more appropriate to its newly position. Its original brain just isn't sophisticated enough to manage the transformation from king to bottom dog without virtually complete dissolution and regrowth. Anyone who has experienced a painful transformation after a serious defeat in romance or career may feel some sense of kinship. What is kinship? With the once successful crustacean. The neurochemistry of defeat and victory. A lobster loser's brain chemistry differs importantly from that of a lobster winner. This is reflected in their relative postures. Whether a lobster is confident or cringing depends on the ratio of two chemicals that modulate. What is modulate? Communication between lobster neurons, serotonin and octopamine. Winning increases the ratio of the former to the later. A lobster with high levels of serotonin and low levels of octopamine is a cocky, strutting sort of shellfish. What is cocky? The next one is strutting sort of shellfish, much likely to back down when challenged. This is because serotonin helps regulate postural flexion. What is flexion? And postural is related to posture. A flexed lobster extends its appendages. What is appendages? so that it can look tall and dangerous like Clint Eastwood in a spaghetti western. When a lobster then has just lost a battle and exposed to serotonin, it will stretch itself out, advance even on former victors, and fight longer and harder. The drugs prescribed to depressed human beings, which are selective serotonin reuptake, what is reuptake inhibitors, have much the same chemical and behavioral effect. In one of the most staggering, what is staggering, demonstrations of the evolutionary continuity of life on Earth, Prozac even cheers up lobsters. High serotonin, low octopamine characterizes the victor. The opposite neurochemical configuration, a high ratio of octopamine to serotonin, produces a defeated looking, scrunched up, inhibited, drooping, sculling sort of lobster, very likely to hang around street corners and to vanish at the first hint of trouble. Serotonin and octopamine also regulate the tail flick reflex, which serves to propel the lobster rapidly backwards when it needs to escape. Less provocation is necessary to trigger that reflex in a defeated lobster. You can see an echo of that in the heightened, startled reflex characteristic of the soldier or battered child with post-traumatic stress disorder. The principle of unequal distribution. When a defeated lobster regains its courage and dares to fight again, it is more likely to lose again than you would predict statistically from a tally of its previous fights. Its victorious opponent, on the other hand, is more likely to win. Its winner take it all in the lobster world, just as it is in human societies, where the top 1% have as much loot as the bottom 50%, and where the richest 85 people have as much as the bottom 3.5 billion. The same brutal principle of unequal distribution applies outside the financial domain. Indeed, anywhere that creative production is required, the majority of scientific papers are published by a very small group of scientists. A tiny proportion of musicians produces almost all recorded commercial music. Just a handful of authors sell all the books. A million and a half separately titled books sell each year in the US. However, only 500 of these sell more than 100,000 copies. Similarly, just 4 classic composers, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, and Tchaikovsky, wrote almost all the music played by modern orchestras. Bach, for his part, composed so prolifically, prolifically, that it would take decades of work merely to hand copy his scores. Yet only a small fraction of this prodigious output is commonly performed. The same thing applies to the output of the other 3 members of this group, hyperdominant composers. Only a small fraction of their work is still widely played. Thus, a small fraction of the music composed by a small fraction of all the classical composers who have ever composed makes up almost all the classical music that the world knows and loves. This principle is sometimes known as Prince's Law, after Derek J. de Sola Prize, the researcher who discovered its application application in science in 1963, it can be modeled using an approximately L-shaped graph with the number of people on the vertical axis and productivity or resources on the horizontal. The basic principle had been discovered much earlier. Vilfredo Pareto, an Italian polymath, noticed its applicability to wealth distribution in the early 20th century, and it appears true for every society ever studied, regardless of governmental form. It also applies to the population of cities. A very small number have almost all the people. The mass of heavenly bodies, a very small number hold all the matter, and the frequency of words in a language. 90% of communication occurs using just 500 words, among many other things. Sometimes it is known as the Matthew principle, derived from what might be the harshest statement ever attributed to Christ. To those who have everything, more will be given. From those who have nothing, everything will be taken. You truly know you are the Son of God when your dicta, word is dicta, apply even to crustaceans. Back to the fractious, word is fractious, shellfish. It doesn't take that long before lobsters, testing each other out, learn who can be messed with and who should be given a wide berth. What is berth with E? And once they have learned, the resultant hierarchy is exceedingly stable. All a victor needs to do once he has won is to wiggle. What is wiggle? His antennae in a threatening manner, and a previous opponent will vanish in a pull-off stand before him. A weaker lobster will quit trying, accept his lowly status, and keep his legs attached to his body. The top lobster, by contrast, occupying the best shelter, getting some good rest, finishing a good meal, parades his dominance around his territory, rousting. Word is rousting subordinate lobsters from their shelters at night, just to remind them who's their daddy. All the girls, the female lobster who also fight hard for territory during the explicitly maternal stages of the existence, identifying the top guy quickly and become irresistibly attracted to him. This is brilliant strategy in my estimation. It's also one used by females of many different species, including humans, instead of undertaking the computationally difficult task of identifying the best man. The females outsource the problem to the machine-like calculation of the dominance hierarchy. They let the males fight it out and peel their paramours. Word is paramours from the top. This is very much what happens with stock market pricing, where the value of any particular enterprise is determined through the competition of all. When the females are ready to shed their shells and soften up a bit, they become interesting in mating. They start hanging around the dominant lobster's pad, spraying attractive scents and aphrodisiacs. What is aphrodisiacs towards him, trying to seduce him. His aggression has made him successful, so he is likely to react in a dominant, irritable manner. Furthermore, he is large, healthy, and powerful. It's no easy task to switch his attention from fighting to mating If properly charmed, however, he will change his behavior towards the female. This is the lobster equivalent of 50 Shades of Grey, the fastest selling paper book of all time, and the Eternal Beauty and the Beast, plot of archetypal romance. This is the pattern of behavior continually represented in the sexual explicit literary fantasies that are as popular among women as provocative images of naked women are among men. It should be pointed out, however, that sheer physical power is an unstable basis on which to found lasting dominance, as the Dutch primatologist, Frans de Waal, has taken pains to demonstrate. Among the troups he studied, males who were successful in the longer term had to buttress. So, ਇੱਥੇ अपना टाइम मुकदा जी 15 मिनट पर मेरा ਜਿਹੜਾ पैराग्राफ में पूरा करना चाहूँगा. सो पैराग्राफ पूरा करके मैं अपनी रीडिंग ਨੂੰ स्टॉप करांगा जी. Even the most brutal chimp, despot, can be taken down after all by two opponents, each 3/4 as mean. In consequence, males who stay on top longer are those who form reciprocal coalitions with their lower status compatriots. And who pay careful attention to the troops, females and their infants. The political ploy of baby kissing is literally millions of years old, but lobsters are still comparatively primitive. So the bare plot element of beast and beauty suffice, will find out for them. Once the beast has been successfully charmed, the successful female lobster will disrobe, shedding their shell, making herself dangerously soft, vulnerable and ready to mate. At the right moment, the male, now converted into a careful lover, deposits a packet of sperm into the appropriate receptacle. Receptacle. Afterward, the female hangs around and harden up for a couple of weeks. Another phenomenon not entirely unknown among human beings. At her leisure, she returns to her own domicile. Laden with fertilized eggs. At this point, another female will attempt the same thing, and so on. The dominant male, with his upright and confident posture, not only gets the prime real estate and easiest access to the best hunting grounds, he also gets all the girls. It is exponentially more worthwhile to be successful if you are a lobster and male. So, हाँ जी, काफ़ी डेप्थ ਵਿੱਚ लिखी हुई बुक है, काफ़ी रिसर्च की हुई है. सो अपने 11 पेज कल 11 पेज तो दूजा पैराग्राफ रीड करना ਆਪਾਂ ਤੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਵਧੀਆ ਰੀਡਿੰਗ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ. ਆਈ ਹੋਪ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਟਾਈਮ ਕੱਢੋਗੇ. ਸੋ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਰੀਡਿੰਗ ਆਪਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਸਟਾਪ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੀ. ਮਿਲਾਂਗੇ ਅਗਲੀ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ. ਟੇਕ ਕੇਅਰ.